All right, so in Canvas, there's the organic character start. What that is. That's what this scene is. So he's going to come in and he will have some lighting in the scene. He has a material on there, so you don't need to worry about adding those, just like the previous one. This one I've actually assigned a cartoony-like texture to it, so he will actually have like outlines around him. Okay, just to show you, you can do stuff like that. He does look kind of blocky here. Let me stop that for a second. Once I hit 3, and then I render this again, we should get nice smooth transitions between all those faces. Okay, and you can see the line work that goes around the legs and stuff. Okay, now you can customize any of this stuff by going into the attribute editor for it. Here's the edge color. Here's how it's detecting the edges, so you can play with those things. I don't have a load of experience using this tool, but if you just come down and start looking at some of these options, you can start to look at different areas that you want to change the color of. There's his base color right there. Some of that, some of this. I lied, why isn't that changing color? That should be there. Mask color. Make sure I click the right part. I clicked his body. Advanced edge control, silhouette, base. Oh, that's off, yes. That's a specular. I'm not sure why the color isn't updating. I'll figure out why it's not doing it. It should be doing it definitely for sure. Yeah, it is on base. Why wouldn't you color? That's up. Yep, I'll have to figure out why it's not coloring. All right, so anyway, you're going to start with this guy here. Now, the difference between what we did in the mechanical one and what we did with this is that he is a soft object. So he doesn't have stuff that we're going to parent to him. We have to do what's called skinning. So we're actually taking the joints, and basically we're not doing it directly, we're doing it indirectly. We're parenting points to the joints. Okay, so Maya will handle that part. So every one of these points that are here will get connected to some joints, and then that's what's going to move the geometry around. So I'm going to create my joints. Now this doesn't have to be as precise as the previous one because we're dealing with a human character. So we have to kind of think about where things have moved from and then put the joints in those appropriate spots. So I'm going to go into my front view. Nope, I'm going to go into my, I'll go in the front view. I'll go in the side view, that's fine. I'm going to go in the side view here, and I'm going to put in, just like we did in the previous one, I'm going to put in a joint right here for where the pelvis would be, where the center point of him is. Then I'm going to switch to my front view, and then I'll drop in a joint for the hip. So what I'm doing is trying to find where the hip would actually be rotating from. So if I go up too high, it's going to have this huge angle that is rotating where like his stomach would actually move every time he rotates his hip. If I go too far down, then it's going to look like his leg is broke. So this cluster of points right here is about the area I want to put that in. So I'm going to go there. And then I'm going to drop down to where the knee is. So I'm going to switch back to my side view. And you'll see that as I drop this one in, it did not drop in the exact spot that I need. It's actually behind. You can see this circle right here. It's behind that area. So I'm just going to nudge it forward, and that feels like it's more centered. I can tweak things afterwards. So this is the knee area. I'm going to drop this in about there. I'm going to come down, do one for the ankle. Come down, do one for the ball of the foot, which would be about here. Okay, not here, there's no divisions there. I'm going to do one, let me hit one there just real quick so we can see. This should be here where that division is, and then this one will be there at the end of that. Okay, now these are probably not lined up perfectly in the front view. When I go back to front, you'll see that they are definitely off. I'll have to adjust those. So I'll do that afterwards. I'm going to hit the up arrow until I get back to the root. And then I'm going to add in my collarbone up here. I'm just going to go straight up with this one. I'll adjust its position later. This should be at, the X position should be 0. It's not X. One of these positions should be 0. I don't know why it's moving so much. And then I'm going to go over here to where the shoulder would be. And again, I'm kind of looking at where the shoulder would rotate from, about there where that cluster is. I'm going to jump to my top view this time. And these just give me a better look at where these points are. So that's why I'm switching to top. Now I can see the elbow. I'll put this back here. Now we can see the wrist. And then that's where the hand is going to be. Okay. Now again, those are not in the right spot. I'll adjust them, but they're in a sort of spot right now. I'm going to hit the up arrow again until we get back to the root. I'm going to go to the right side. Now I need to add some sort of control so we can open and close the mouth. So I have to think of this like a jaw. So I'm going to drop in, and this is going to be weird, this is where it worked out. I'm going to drop in a joint way back here. And this is where the root of the joint is going to be. So somewhere like this, I think, is where I wanted it, like that. And then I'm going to put this way up here. Maybe that's too much. Let me go back. I'm going to go maybe there and here. I think that might be good. We'll try that out and see. Okay. So now I'm going to just back to my move tool, and then I'm just going to go into these, and then just start nudging these down into their position. So I'm just grabbing the one arrow, and then lining that up. Same thing here. I'm going to grab this, and just nudge that over. All right, so that should be good. I'm going to go through and rename things. So just like I did in the other ones, this will be left hip, left knee, cool, and left toes. Now if I had a character that had its toes, like each individual toe, I wouldn't need to do individual joints for each one. But if I'm doing a hand, I would do joints for each individual finger so that I could do that. This will be hips. There we go. And then this is neck. He's not going to have any like left and right movement. His eye is going to be what moves. So I did not build any of that in there. This is going to be left shoulder, left elbow, there we go. And then that is his jaw, and these are his teeth. Okay. So now everything in here should be labeled. Yep. So then I'm just going to start mirroring things over. So I'm going to grab the shoulder joint, yes, and go to skeleton, go to mirror joint, search for left, replace it with right. I believe this is the YZ direction. Yep, there we go. Then I'll grab this and just hit G to redo that last command, and now we have our joints. Okay. So now I'm going to grab I'm going to save as. I like to do these, anytime I do something like this, it's a little bit more, or a little bit less forgiving. So if I do make a mistake, sometimes you have to go back 10 steps in order to fix a mistake, and then you can move forward. So I like to save it as I go. So I'm going to grab the joints, I'm going to shift click the dude, and then I'm going to go to skin and bind skin. And this is where it all comes together. Make sure I reset this. Yes. Okay. So right now it's going to do binding to joint hierarchy, which means it's going to bind basically every single joint will have some sort of control on it. I'm going to make this a little bit easier on myself, and I'm just going to do selected joints. And I'm going to grab all the joints except for the very end ones. Okay, so like the finger ones I'm not going to grab. The jaw one I am going to grab, but not teeth. And then on the hip, I'm going to grab everything but the toes. Okay, and you'll see why when we get to that step. Shift click this again. So I'm going to do selected joints. The bind method, there's different formulas for how it's going to do this. In this particular case, I found that this geodesic voxel was the best one. Sometimes I'll go through and try the first one, see how that comes out, then do the second one, see how that comes out, and so on. So for this one, I just did that. Same thing with the skinning method of how it's skinning it. This is just another way that it's formulating things. Linear was fine for this one, okay? Weight distribution, let's see, neighbors. That's fine, that's fine. Okay, and then for resolution, I'm gonna crank this up to 1024. And I'll show you what that is when we get to it. Okay, so the only thing I changed was selected joints, and I picked the joints. Geodesic voxel, and that was it. Everything else, or sorry, and then resolution. Everything else was default. So now I'm gonna bind skin. Now what this does, it takes the geometry, takes the joints, puts those two things together. So now when I go and rotate the joints, I should be rotating the geometry as well. Now depending on the character and complexity and all this stuff, sometimes this does take a minute to calculate. You just wiggle your mouse back and forth until it's done. On a Mac it makes it funner because it actually gets bigger when you do shake the mouse. I can close that, I don't need that right now. While we're waiting for that, I'm going to open up my folder, which is not there. It's here, organic rig. There we go. Don't curse me like that. There it goes. So it finished. When you do it, maybe. Yeah, you just have to be patient with Maya. So now if we look closely, we'll see that the joints are no longer a solid color, they're actually multicolored. And that's going to help us when we get to the next part, which is controlling which points are being controlled by which joints, okay? If I grab this joint here and I go and rotate it, you'll see that it rotates that geometry. Now one thing I did forget to do was orient my joints. So this joint, let me make sure my rotate tool is reset, yes. Okay, so if I rotate it, that, you know, it looks kind of wobbly there. Let me check one of my other joints like this one. Yep, you can see the rotate here is like way off. Same thing here, like that one's fine. Let's grab this. All right, that one should be fine too. And then there's the shoulder. Okay, now when we get to the shoulder here in areas like this, it gets confused as to what points it should be actually controlling. It doesn't know what a shoulder is, it doesn't know what a hand is. It just knows geometry and joints. So when I grab this joint and I rotate it, you can very easily see that it's like deforming parts of the body too. When I grab this and rotate it, you'll see how it opens the mouth, but not all the way, okay? Your setup will be completely different. Where you put the joints will dictate what stuff is moving. If I move this joint even a little bit further up before I skinned it, it might actually grab part of this upper lip, and so that when I do this, it'll actually move the upper lip with it, okay? So this is just part of the process that we have to do. Now, I did make a boo-boo. I didn't orient all my joints first, so I'm going to grab my skin, go to skin, and then say unbind. And what that does is it just removes the binding from it, okay? So usually when I bind skin, it takes a couple goes to make sure I remembered everything. So I'm going to go here to orient joint. Okay, oops, I should make sure my options are still good. Orient joint to the world. Yep, everything's good there. So it's just the default settings. Now this main one, I'm going to go back to that orient. And I'm going to say orient joint to the world and don't do the children. There we go. There we go. So now he has a nice rotation thing there. So now let's go back to skin, back to bind skin. The options are still there. And we'll go back. Now one of the things that you'll commonly hear in the world, oops, I forgot to select all my joints, that's fine, is bind pose. So right now the pose that we put him in when we bound him is referred to as a bind pose. I didn't select all the joints when I did this, and my options were set to just do the joints I have selected. So you'll see that this doesn't do anything. So not a big deal if I click it and I go to unbind, then I can go back in here and grab all the joints again. grab him again, and then go back to that bind skin. Now, typically when you do a character, you want to have that bind pose initiated. So that's why his arms are out like this. If I did hands, his hands would be splayed as far as they can, just so we have no accidental like parenting or skinning that would happen. It's never foolproof, but it does help as you do that. Even his mouth, sometimes you'll have the mouth even more open so that you don't have that thing. Ideally, you want to find a good middle ground for your character so that you can do the posing, you can get the bones where they need to be, and then you can tweak them afterwards and animate them. So if I had a character who had like a lot of jowls, I wouldn't want to bind him with his mouth wide open because it's going to be very difficult to tweak what the jowls are doing once I start doing what I'm going to do next. I want to find like a good middle ground, and then I can adjust it so that his mouth opens and closes correctly. All right, so let's see what happens this time. Now we might get some different results. That'll be fine. We'll have to adjust everything anyway, so that's fine. All right, let's grab his mouth one. Yep, so same result there. Okay. We'll need to add some controls. So you did this in the last one. I'm just going to create some controls. And again, the controls should be at the joints themselves. There we go. Bless you. Parenting, I want to parent this to the pelvis. Okay. If I looked at this and I decided I wanted to be able to rotate the character like that, I definitely could do that, but because his mouth isn't connected to him, that would look weird to have just his upper body move and not his mouth. So he's not going to be like that kind of character. This part here is very like one piece. He can open and close his mouth, but he'll never like twist like that. Okay. He's just not built to do that. So this would go to this pelvis, so that way when I move the pelvis, it moves that controller. Do the same thing on the other side. I'm going to duplicate this. I'm going to put it way over here. I don't need to reparent it or anything. It should automatically be there. Oops, that went too far. That should have been right at the wrist. There we go. And then I'm going to duplicate this and just throw this down here. I'm just using these basic controls. You can definitely make whatever controls you want. I don't know what happened to my control. Where'd it go? There we go. This one I'm going to drop right onto the ground, like right where his foot is. Now duplicate this, slide it onto this side just by making that positive 129. Okay. Now these two, I want to be able to take the character and move him forward without these moving. Very similar to the crab mech, so those will not be parented. I could have done the same thing here with these. If I wanted my character to be able to move forward and not have his hands move, I could have just left those as unparented. Typically I like those to move with him. So now I'm just going to grab all of these and I'm just going to freeze the transforms. Okay, I would give them names, controls, blah, 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 same stuff that we did before. And let's go to, okay, and again, I'm just throwing down circles here just for ease and speed. I would actually want to make nice controls like we did in the mech one. Okay, and this will be his main controller. And we will freeze the transforms on this, and then we will take that, shift-click this, parent it. And so now we can move the whole character around. We have those. Okay, these here will be parented to that as well. There we go. And then I'm just going to make another circle. And this one's going to be his hip controller. Okay, so this will be parented to that. I'm going to freeze the transforms, and then I actually should have parented this to that one. There we go. So now I can move this down if I need to. Move these. Yep, okay. All right, so now let's start to make some of these controls. I'm going to go to Create IK Handle. Rotate Plane Solver is the default one that we've always used. And then I'm just going to grab the elbow, grab the wrist, and then the same thing we did in the other one, I'm just going to shift-click that circle and parent it. That way I can grab the circle, move that around, and then control that hand doing that. Do the same thing on the other side. So back to that IK Handle tool, back to this, shift-click the circle, parent it. Okay. You'll see a lot of similarities regardless of what kind of character we're doing. We have the same kind of controls, so we're still using that IK handle. When we get down here to the legs, same thing. Grab this, grab that, shift-click this, parent it. And so now we can move that leg around. Grab this, grab that. That makes the IK handle, and then we just shift-click the circle and parent it, and now we can move that leg around. Okay? So now we have the basic controls. I can do this. I don't know what's happening with that. It's pretty funny, though. I can do that. I can obviously move those around. Why wouldn't you be moving that? All right, so we'll have to see where that's coming in, like why that's being there. I think what's probably happening is maybe the legs are controlling part of the mouth, and so that's why as he moves down like this, the legs are rotating, and that's what's causing his mouth to go in. We'll find out. Okay, so now this is the confusing part. Everything we've done so far as these controls is all the same stuff as the previous one. I'm going to right-click on the character and go to the Paint Skin Weights tool. So think of this like a mask inside of Photoshop. So if we have a layer in Photoshop and we want something to be visible, we put a layer mask on it, and if it's white, it's visible, and if it's black, it's invisible, right? So think of it the same way. When I click on the hips here, it's showing me all the points that the hips are affecting. Okay, so everything where it's white, that's what the hips are affecting. Everywhere it's black, the hips are not affecting that. Okay, let me turn off, I think I have my wireframe turned on somewhere in here. Display, show wireframe, there we go. Okay, so you can see very easily what, this is pretty white and then this is black right there. So the hips themselves are not affecting any of that stuff, but the hips are affecting part of the mouth and they shouldn't. Okay, so typically you want to start off at the furthest parts and work your way towards the center. So if I go to the mouth, which is right there, I was already on it, there we go, the jaw, you can see this is all the stuff that's affecting it. Now it might look like it's already white, it's not. This is like a light gray. Every single point that's inside here, I'm just going to switch off the tool for a second. If I click on one of these points, click on one of these points, there we go. And I go to the general editors and I go to component editor and I scroll over to smooth skin. This individual point right here is being affected 39% by the hips, 1% by the left shoulder, 46% by the neck, 0.01% or 0.1% for the right hip, and then 0.130 from the right shoulder, okay? So imagine that we have this black and white map, and then the values from it are being brought by all these other items, okay? So this one point, if I were to move the right hip, it would have a subtle motion to it, a subtle movement. Very similar to like parent constraint. When we were picking something up from the table, it was either a 0 or a 1. Well, imagine we had 50 items and they were all contributing to that same item and how it was moving. That's what this is. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to go and grab the character. I'm going to go to Skin, and I'm going to say Prune Small Weights. Okay, so something that is affecting it like super small, I just want to get rid of it, just assign it to something. So that's what this is going to do. I'm going to say prune, and now if I were to go and grab that point again, go back to my component editor, you'll see that that one that was 0.001 is no longer in here because it realized it's probably just too small to worry about, just get rid of it. Now if I go back to my prune small weights again, I set this number up higher like 0.1 and then say prune. Go back to the points, go back to component editor. You'll see now we only have these 3 that are really affecting it. Okay, so you can play with that number more, and what that's going to do is just take that weight and kind of move it around. I'm going to go back to that paint skin weights mode. I'm going to make sure that my normalized weights is set to interactive. Yes. And then what I'm going to do is I'm just going to paint the values I want. So when I move the jaw, which points do I want to move? I definitely don't want to move the butt. That's kind of weird, but that's what's happening. I need to worry about this value, and I need to worry about opacity, and I need to worry about what kind of brush, and then what method am I using. Typically, you're going to use replace or smooth. Those are typically the 2 that I'll use. So I'm going to replace these values with 1. I'm going to make my brush bigger. Whoops. So I'm going to hold B, left click and drag, and then I'm just going to click and drag. Let's try this again. I'm on that, yes. I'm on this, I'm on this, I'm on that. I'm on 1, yes. It doesn't want to update. Why aren't you updating? Draw brush, yes. X-ray joints. All right, let's close the tool and then let's reopen it and see why it's not working right. All right, let's try add. No, add's not doing anything. Smooth. Nothing wants to work on here. I have something clicked wrong. I have to. Maya would not make a mistake, I'm sure of it. Wait, that, place. Make the brush bigger, paint, nope. All right, let's save as and then reopen the scene. Maya's getting upset. Skin, yes. Jaw, replace that, interactive, yes, yes. There it goes. So whatever reason it wasn't working. All right, so I'm replacing all the values here with 100%. So this white, you can definitely tell this white is a lot more brilliant of a white than we had a second ago. And what I'm doing is saying, okay, these are all the points that when I open the jaw, this is what I want to move. There should be some kind of tapering. There should be some kind of softness. So like right here, definitely, as I open my mouth, those front faces should move. But way over here, I should have eventually black, but there should be some transitional areas, okay? So I'm just going to paint this pretty aggressively. And then you may have to go inside the mouth. There you go. And then paint inside here too. You may have to shrink your brush down and then hit these other points. It does help if you change your brush to this harder brush. There it goes. And it does take a minute to do this stuff, but the results are amazing. Now this is the introduction to this kind of method. Typically you're doing Hollywood stuff. You would do a lot more of this where you're using actual, like you're building muscles for your character and animating the muscles so that as the character is moving, the muscles will jiggle and give the rig a little bit more substance. There we go. All right, so that's pretty good there. Now I'm going to go to the back side where we don't want these to be affected. I'm going to go to the value, and I'm just going to paint all these black. Now what happens is, as we're doing this, as I'm painting these ones white, and I'm painting the other ones black, Maya's automatically going through and assigning those points to something else. Every point has to add up to 100% of somewhere. Okay, if we have 50 joints, 50 points on there, the weight for each one of those points has to add up to 100 of where it's getting its movement. So let's test this out. So I'm just going to switch back to my rotate tool, grab that joint, and then rotate it. And then you'll see now we're getting something that's a lot closer to what we want. Now it sucks having to constantly switch back and forth between these two tools to test it out. So I can actually rotate it like this, then go to my Paint Skin Weights tool, and then go to Smooth. And then you can see how I can just hit this a little bit with some smoothing to help transition that jaw into the rest of the mouth, or into the rest of the body. Smaller brush, there we go. Now the more points you have, the softer you can create these transitions. But also the more points you have to worry about. All right, so that looks pretty good. Okay.
So do you use either 100% black or 100% white, or can you go through the gray?
You can go through the grays, okay? And sometimes you will do that. It all depends on what specifically you're doing. So if I'm here, and let's say that I want to smooth this out, and I'm hitting it with smooth, and nothing's really happening too much. Sometimes I'll go into, let's say, scale, and whatever value is here, it's going to multiply this number by that. So any number right now times 0 is going to be what? 0, right? So if I set this to like 0.25, then it'll put 0.25 there. Okay, so typically I don't change the color itself, like I don't go to replace and replace this with, let's say, 0.25 and paint it. Typically I'll just use the scale and I'll just set this to another number. Okay, because what happens is right now as I paint this, I'm taking 80% off of it each time, or I'm taking 20% off of it each time. Okay, so that helps you kind of smooth those transitions. So I can take this, I can pop that open, go back to my painting tool, and kind of smooth that out some more. You know, obviously maybe I don't want it to come down this far, that might be a little bit too extreme.
Settings to be leery of or watch out for where it might paint through the object to the other side?
It shouldn't.
Okay.
The only thing you have to look out for is he's two-sided, so I have to paint the inside of the mouth as well. And then we'll just smooth that out. That looks pretty good. Oops. Now he will poke through too if you have points that are, you know, not affecting it correctly. There we go. That's good. And then I'm just going to replace with 0 all the way back here. Okay, a little bit of movement back there wouldn't hurt, but I think it was probably too much. And then you also want to watch out for this. It's barely visible on the projector. It's a little bit more visible on my screen. But sometimes you'll get just like a single point that's being affected. So like every time the mouth opens, he'll have this like little twitchy thing like on his cheek or something. So just be aware of that. So I'm just going to make sure I remove those. That's good. And I may want to just add a little bit more smoothness right here on the sides. Right? So think of how you open your mouth. It's not just like the bottom jaw is moving. You actually have some softness that would happen where the top lip would also move a bit. There we go. All right, so that's pretty good there. And we'll smooth this out some too. There's no magic number or magic spot. We're just kind of looking at it to see what it looks like. Once I'm happy with it and I'm like, cool, this is exactly what I want my jaw to look like, I need to hit the lock. Because what happens otherwise is I'll go on to the next area and I'll start subtracting stuff or adding stuff. And then it'll start pulling stuff away from the jaw area. And then we have to go back and redo that. Which is why we start from the outside and kind of work our way in. That way we don't have to worry about that. Okay, so let's take the jaw there and then just reset it. And you can test it out, make sure it feels like it's working. Okay, oops. If I go too far, you can see that I definitely cut through there. So I just need to be careful that I either don't go too far or I go back and tweak it. The nice thing is, at any point, you can come back and tweak those values. Okay, even if we're animating and then we see something happen, we can jump back in, smooth those things out. It's no big deal. All right, so now let's go and grab the circle here and move this. And again, we can see that, you know, more stuff is moving than it should. Now, if I know that his controls, I should be able to grab this and move. Whoa, look at that. You got some weirdness happening there. We'll have to check that out. If I know that I only want to keep that main area as a big chunk, that means that for his hips, all the rest of the stuff should be 100% white. Okay, so all of this, all around here, all around the back, the only transition spots are here and there. Okay, so if I go into the hips area, go to replace, set this to 1, I'm just going to do this. Now, even though I painted that already, because it's locked, it'll automatically ignore it. If I jump off, jump back on, you'll see it goes away. But everywhere else I paint, it'll keep it. So what I'm doing is just saying I want all of these to be controlled by those hips. Now imagine you had a full character where you have all the bones in the body. All of these things have to be painted for each one of those. There we go. I can come back and tweak that in a bit. Just want to make sure I get the majority of this. There we go. Then I'm going to go inside the mouth again. Oops. Now I don't have to worry about accidentally assigning something to the jaw because the jaw's locked, so I can't change that unless I unlock it. Now sometimes you get these like weird spots where it's like it doesn't want to change, like it's just stuck on black, it won't change at all. For those, make sure you're on 1. That's usually an easy thing. And then change your brush to that harder one. Typically that does it. Okay, so that looks pretty good. I'm going to hit smooth here, and I'm going to just hit this flood. And what that'll do is it'll just smooth out the transitions in these spots. There we go. Okay, so now I'm going to switch off, switch back on, and you'll see the jaw is back to being its original color. And then if I go back to my controller and I go to move, you'll see that for the most part the arm is working. There are some weird spots where it is, not doing what it should be doing. So now I'm going to go back to this, turn the jaw, unlock the jaw, and then I'm just going to prune those small weights again. Sometimes you just have to do that just to clean it up a bit. I'm going to do this at 0.2. There we go. Let's see. Look at much more solid than it was a second ago. Let's open up the jaw some. There we go. Jaw still works. Let's grab this. Okay. Legs seem like they're working. Ignore the feet at the moment. They're just kind of freaking out. And then that. Okay. So that looks like it's working pretty good. Now we do have limitations just like before. We just have to be aware of them so that we don't move our character into those spots. So he can actually move up pretty far, but just be aware that sometimes you'll get these like weird crimps right there. And if you look at the Andy rig or the other guy rig that we had, you'll get those weird areas. Okay, there's no way about it. Just kind of getting into that spot of making sure that that works right. I think that's good. And then the same thing here. Yep. And then the same thing there. Okay, so it looks like it's pretty good. That seems like it's working the way it should be. Okay, so skinning is done. Obviously it took a bit to do that, but sometimes you have to. Now, let me save before I screw anything up. We're going to pretend that I needed to change something. I forgot to orient a joint. If I didn't do or know enough about skinning, I'd have to redo all that stuff that I just did. Okay? But under skin, I can actually export out the weight maps. Okay, so each one of those things that I was painting is actually a picture that Maya saves that we could export out. So I'm going to export this out. Actually, I don't think I need it that big. 2048 should be good. 2048. Luminance. I'll save this as an if, or there's TIFF, there it is. And then I'm going to say export. And I'm just going to throw this into my folder, so 2540. Okay, character, skin weight. And then yes. Okay, so what this is going to do is it's going to go to each one of those joints and send the black and white texture map for those joints to the hard drive. So if I go into this folder, there's the weight map. So this is kind of like the definition. And then inside here is each one of those files. So this is basically the black and white map for each one of those. So if I accidentally screwed this up, I can always get it back, okay? So let's pretend that I deleted the history on this. So history is gone. Once history is deleted on an object like this, it stops working, okay? So don't delete history. Now I'm going to go back and I'm just going to reattach all that stuff. So where are my joints at? Right here. So hips to left foot ball, neck to that, this to that. Now obviously I need to make sure I grab the right joints, same ones I grabbed last time. I'm going to go back to bind skin, and this time I'm just going to leave it at the default selected joints. Okay, so now it's all messed up again. So I'm going to grab the skin, go to skin here, and then I'm just going to import those weight maps. Oops. Oh my God. Organic rig, data, there it is. Now this is the fun part. It's like rebuilding the character. And so now everything is back to where it was. Okay, so if I needed to orient a joint or fix something, I can export the maps out, unbind him, fix whatever I need fixing, and then reattach the skin and then re-import those skin weights. This is your lifesaver right there. Being able to import and export, huge lifesaver. All right, so apart from the default ones that we need to also adjust, let's do the other hard one, or other more difficult one, which is going to be the eye. So I'm going to bring this up here. Okay, so it's centered on the eye. Let's pull that out. So this is his eye control right here. Let's give it a little bit of shape. Whoops. There we go. Even though he has one eye, we'll just do a two controller. Okay. So this will get parented to that. This will get frozen transformed. There we go. And then this one we've already done before. So we've already grabbed these. We've already gone to constrain. We've already gone to aim, offset. And then if we go to wireframe, we can see that happen. Okay, so we've done that on the mech character. The difference here is we want to create a blink. Okay, so I'm going to go to name this eye control. And I'm going to do a blink. So I'm going to grab the character. I'm going to go to Window, Animation Editor, and Shape Editor. And what this allows you to do is I can basically create what are called blend shapes. I can say, this is the starting pose, this is the ending pose, and I want you to morph in between them. It's the same way that we would get a character to do lip syncing if we didn't want to create a bunch of controls on the face. The item is pretty simple to use. We just create a blend shape, so this is like the start of it. And then I have to add a target, and that's what the end result would look like. So I say add target, and now I'm in edit mode, and so whatever I do to this will be controlled by a slider. So when it's at 1, I want to make this look like he is blinking. So I'm going to go to my faces. I'm going to try to grab the faces here, so let's try this. There we go. So I was trying to find the right selection to grab those. Shift greater than to grab the next one out. And then I'm just going to pull this down, give it a smidge of some rotation here, pull it down again, smidge of rotation. Okay, and I'm going to do the same thing on the bottom. Shift greater than to grab that next row, and then I rotate and move it up, and then rotate and move it up, and maybe even scale this some just so it flattens out. Okay, now this is in rough mode. I need to hit 3 so I can make sure that they are overlapping, which they are doing. Okay, so now I have a slider. Okay, now the more time you spend on that, obviously you can make this look a little bit more realistic. I'm going to pull that up, hit 1, and then this line right here should be kind of meeting it in the middle. So I'm just going to rotate that some and pull that out. And I'll do the same thing with this one. There we go. So now if we hit 3 on this and then do it, we have sort of kind of a blink. I think we still need to adjust some of these points a bit. So that'll be sufficient for our blink. Then we just close it. Okay, now once I've done that, once I've gone to that tool, made the blink happen, over here I have a blink. Okay, now I'm going to tie this blink into this controller. So I'm going to make an attribute. We'll call this blink. Actually, let me do some underscores first. That way we have separation, and then I'll do blink. 0 where there's no blink, and then 10 where there is a blink. And then however you want to link these two things up, that's up to you to do. So I'm just going to go to expressions for mine. And this is called blend shape 1. So blend shape 1 dot body 1 is equal to, it's iController is what I named it. Nope, just iControl dot blink. And so now I should be able to grab this and move his eye position. Let's turn wireframe on so we can see it. And then I should be able to go to blink and then have him blink. Now this will actually go through, it's kind of weird, but the control will actually let you go past what the limits are. So I'm going to get that expression back up, and I'm just going to say divided by 10. It wants to go 0 to 1. I have my controller going 0 to 10. So I'm going to divide it by 10, which means that when this is at 10, that's actually at 1 for that one. So now I just have a bit more control over that. Cool. Okay, so now I can control where he looks, and then I can also control him blinking. And keep in mind, it's never really like super slow like that. Unless it's Zootopia. Cool. All right, so other controls we'd want to have on here is we want to be able to control the wrist. Right now I can't control the wrist. So I'm going to go to this joint. I'm going to grab this first. Come on. Shift click this joint. Go to constrain, orient, maintain offset. Yes. So now I can grab this. I can move it. And then I can rotate that wrist. Same thing on this side. Same thing down here. I'd also need to create a controller of some sort. And again, I'm just using circles for ease. You'd again want to make nice ones. And this will be for the elbow. So I'm just rotating that for the elbow. Have one on the other side. Make sure it's parented to the correct thing. Make sure it's frozen transformed. And then I'm just grabbing the circle here, grabbing the IK handle, and constraining pull vector. There. Go. And then I can hide that IK handle. So now I can move this. I can rotate that. And then I can grab this and move that up and down if I need to. Okay. Now if this turns out that maybe that shoulder looks a little bit too rough, I can always go back to my paint skin weights, find that joint, so that's probably left shoulder, right there. And then maybe I'll just go to smooth and just smooth that out some. There we go. And then I can just reset all these back to 0. Grab this, reset that back to 0, and now everything is back where it was when it started. Okay, so let me save this, and I'll open up the one that I have. Skinned, I believe, is the latest one. Yep. There we go. And so now I have this control to open and close his mouth. I grab here. I have my blink that's linked to him. I also have my smile. So I added that other one there. If I wanted to control his mouth, I can have that. I left them on here, but definitely you want to have separate controls. I don't want to have to grab the character's body to move any of those. So we still have this you can open and close. And then the rest of this, like I said, is just the same as before. We'd have controls here to rotate this. We'd also want to control here to rotate this, so we can have that foot rotating. So we'd have some circle or whatever to do those ones. There's the foot. And then that should be it. Okay? So once you have all your stuff rigged, same thing. Animate him. You can do a character set, like I mentioned before. Definitely helps when you're animating your stuff. Or you can do a straight animation where you just grab stuff and start setting keyframes on things. Cool. Obviously I didn't go over every single step because a lot of this is repetitive of the first one. The idea here is just be able to go through and say, what do I want to control? On the foot, I want to be able to move it, for sure. But I also want to be able to grab this and control that. Okay, oops. And look at it, we got some weird joint stuff happening here. Let's fix that real quick. Left elbow, wrist, shoulder, hip. There we go. Oops, go to the other side. Yep, so that football is not affecting, it should be just affecting these points here. So I just want to make sure that all of these have that. And then the right ankle is affecting all of this stuff. Okay, and you'll get an idea of doing this as you start to play with the settings as to, maybe I need to add these points or those points or whatever. Yep, so that should be good. So now if I grab this, now I'm getting more of that toe actually tapping down. Okay. Cool. Another thing you can do is under your skin, you can actually mirror weights too. So if you like how weights are set up on one side but maybe not the other, you can pick the direction. Anytime you see these two directions, X, Y, Y, Z, or X, Z, what I do is I look down here, whichever one the mirroring direction is, so this in case it's X because X is facing the direction is left and right. Whichever one doesn't have X, that's the one you pick. And then if you go from positive to negative, it's going to go from this side to that side. So whichever one you want to go, you just mirror it. And I didn't fix this side, but now it should be fixed. And now it is fixed. And then